Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a thrill to be sharing the stage with all you fine people. Wanted to start, Zach, thank you for dressing up. Zach was a late addition to the panel, and he is a very valuable part of the conversation we're going to have. I'd like to start by noting that one NBA team does not have a publicly listed representative at this conference, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. So I'm curious about the state of the league in terms of how ubiquitous analytics is now and analytically minded staffing is now compared to, say, 3 to 5 years ago, and how far away are we from a sort of equilibrium point where every franchise is kind of coming from the same place. And Mike, if you want to start us off in this discussion.
Well, it's, from the Celtics perspective, it's not a bad thing that the Lakers aren't here. But, look, every year we say, you remember the first one of these conferences when there were 10 of us in a room and we pulled some desk chairs to the front of the room. Clearly, things have changed since then, but no, we're not at an equilibrium point. There's new data coming, obviously, over the past couple days. You've heard about this location data. Not every team has that. Not every team is looking at the same numbers. Not every team, there isn't even a publicly available set of numbers that everyone agrees is important yet. It's getting better. I think points per possession is something that everyone talks about now, which would have been really alien 7 years ago when this conference started. But, the word equilibrium means we're really sort of settled and everyone's even, and it's definitely not there.
Right.
But Mike, do you ever think it will be?
Well, so there's equilibrium and then there's real equilibrium, right? So there's, it's like anything else scientific, right? There's always progress happening. But as progress happens in a certain area, it becomes harder and harder to get more good at it, right? So there's sort of diminishing returns to scale in certain areas. So the question is, will we get other data or other sets of information that are going to be useful? And I don't know how much more there is after this location data, but at the very least, there's no question we're not there now, right?
I would guess that over the course of time, you're never going to find people that value data the same way. And so equilibrium is not going to happen because some people, what's important in some places is going to be more important than in other places. And the resources, the budgeting, the time and attention to it in Houston is going to be different than it is in San Antonio than someplace else.
Right, so it depends what you mean by equilibrium,
yeah.
Right?
I don't think we're ever going to see a time where equilibrium is all 30 teams paying the same attention to.
Well, let's put it this way.
Because technology is changing, first of all. First of all, our information's coming at different sources, and it's getting better. And now we're going to the sports view and all that kind of stuff. So, to say that we're all sort of in this equal spot, I don't know if that's the case. I say this, that because there's new ways to get the data and then analyze the data, everybody's trying to stay on the forefront. It's like Google versus Apple. How do you stay on the forefront and get the best data at the best time to make the best decisions, either on the basketball side in terms of player personnel or on the coaching side?
Well, I think it was said in 2011 that approximately 10 of 30 teams would not qualify as analytic teams insofar as they did not really invest in that kind of philosophy. Are there any abstentions still today? Is there a sense of, are there holdouts still in terms of franchises?
If we can keep the Lakers locked out, that's fine with us.
Us too, by the way.
Yeah, we're. They don't. I don't know what RC is doing. He didn't call me up and say, you know what, we're going to start investing in this new thing today, Mike. Just figured I'd let you know.
But
the phone call doesn't happen.
Right.
So I don't know what the other teams are doing, except when.
The Lakers may be doing something.
Yeah.
They just may not be here.
The other thing is teams have different incentives at different times in their sort of cycles of being a team. So, and the other things RC's talking about too, like resources and what city a team's in. All of those things still matter too. So even if you reach some sort of equilibrium in data availability and potential data use, you still wouldn't see everyone valuing guys the same because they have different needs and so on and so forth.
There's also a danger, I think, in assuming that teams were like they were 2 years ago, or teams who don't have the cameras are essentially dumb, and that's not true. I mean, ESPN just did a good story about the Blazers, who don't have the cameras, but they have a pretty robust data team and a pretty robust analytics program, and it was sort of their way of saying, hey, you know, we're not in the sort of Houston, San Antonio, Boston, Oklahoma City group of teams that always get listed, but we're doing it too. And you know, the Knicks were sort of the classic, we're behind the times team, but now they have a very good analytics program. They've got the cameras, they've got smart people doing smart stuff, so it's always going to change.
Right.
And there's also a big danger of trying to do everything. Instead of figuring out a few things that you feel like are really important and being as good as possible at those certain things.
On this panel previously, in previous years, Mark Cuban has said that there are only two coaches in the league who could plausibly, justifiably ignore analytics, and that was Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich. And so, RC, I'm curious, how does Pop approach it? How's your front office approach analytics? Obviously, he's the only one.
He calls Phil and finds out what's important. You know, I think a couple things. When we first started looking at analytics, there were some non-traditional pieces of our system, how we valued the corner three, that weren't necessarily traditional at the time that the data supported. And I think Pop got interested when he saw areas that weren't traditional in basketball philosophy that were important to him supported by the data. And he started asking different questions. And while a lot of that information is not given to him in a spreadsheet and it's filtered, and I think the presentation this summer we looked at our defensive efficiency, which for years had been very high, and then last year we went in the 10 to 15 range, and I think we were valuing some things that weren't nearly as important as what the data showed us. And I mean, we learned from the Celtics that not necessarily defensive rebounding, while they were really high in defensive efficiency, they weren't very high in defensive rebounding, and that was a big part of where our emphasis was, and it made us question, is that really where we should be paying attention? And those were discussions that were then brought to Pop from our coaches and from our analytics team, and some great discussions came from that ended up having us reevaluate what was important to us.
And how do you share that with players? If you do share it with players, does it trickle down to the floor, or is that kept mostly
I think
among you guys?
It depends on what you're sharing with them. I mean, they know what's different now, that what is more important maybe for us defensively this year. It's not shown in a spreadsheet, but it's shown through film. It's, you know, emphasized in all of our drills. And so that data, while not necessarily presented to them, to a point guard the same way it is to the head coach, is being used in making decisions that are then implored upon to the team.
Right, right. Well, speaking of teams that seem to play analytically on the floor, talking about corner threes and so forth, Stan, your Magic seemed, from afar at least, to fit that profile also. What was your relationship with analytics in Orlando? And how did you, as a coach, what struggles did you have in terms of pushing back sometimes, potentially, on analytic recommendations?
I didn't really push back a lot. First of all, I wasn't with a team that was doing a lot with analytics in either place, either in Miami or Orlando at the time. You know, a little bit like RC was talking about with Pop, there were some things that we were doing that I think the analytics supported, and it allowed us to, number one, go a little bit farther with the philosophy, okay? At the very basics, you know, the shot efficiencies, and it also fit our personnel, which I think is important, that, you know, layups and free throws and threes, and we didn't want to shoot many mid-range jump shots. I remember being in Miami, you know, and all the TV analysts, I won't mention them by name, but, you know, they would be killing us because, you know, we didn't have guys with a mid-range game, and I felt like saying, thank God, you know, because of the efficiency of those things. But so, both offensively and defensively, it also helped us in presenting it to our players. I mean, the first day every year of training camp, I mean, would be getting out and drawing areas on the floor and showing them what percentages were, and that's why we wanted these shots and didn't want other shots as much, and we formed our philosophy, especially on the defensive end, from that. And so we used the analytics. Look, I didn't really, I don't think, ever push back. I mean, I like having more information. I think the challenge is, you know, as we're talking about going forward, eventually, I don't know when, I think most people will catch up in terms of what they have available to them. What's going to separate teams, like it does in every other area of life, is how you use the information that's available to you. And I think that'll be the difference. So I always wanted a lot of information, but some of it I found really valuable, and others of it I didn't find valuable.
If I could press, what did you not find valuable? Any examples of?
Well, a lot of the lineup stuff, you get the 5-man combinations, and I'd have people coming and saying, well, look, this is our best lineup. And I'd look, and we'd be in game 72, and that lineup will have played 39 minutes together. Well, look, I'm not a statistics guy, but that cannot be statistically valid after 39 minutes. Most of it played in 3-minute spurts somewhere. I mean, it just doesn't add up. And so you can go those 5-man lineups, and at the end of an 82-game season, you'll be lucky if you have 3 lineups that have played anywhere near a couple hundred minutes together. So I just don't think there's a lot of validity there. It doesn't mean I didn't look at them. I did, but I just don't think there's a lot of validity in that.
Right. Well, I'm curious to the rest of you guys, is there anything along those lines where the numbers may indicate a certain tendency that you decided to reject because for reasons like Stan said or for other ones? 2 for 1, for example, is a contentious topic.
Mike and I were just talking about that one.
On 2 for 1s.
The funny thing about this stuff is people don't look at the variance in these things a lot. And actually, you're being a good statistician right now, even though you don't maybe think that you are, right? So there's 39 minutes of data. You can look at lineups and see how many minutes you need before a lineup actually is played together enough so that you can feel confident in some number with some amount of confidence, right? So that's something people just don't pay attention to. Everything's an average, right? And so there's always available to someone who doesn't want to hear the information that you're giving them, whether rightly or wrongly, this situation that we're talking about today isn't the average situation, so therefore I should ignore the average. So you have to ask yourself, if you're the person presenting the data to Stan, and you're about to hand him something that says you need to play this lineup a lot, which has played 39 minutes, how confident should you be and should he be in that information when they get it? It's just not, a lot of the times the answer is not very confident, right? It's a noisy game.
I would hope that any stats guy on an NBA team would understand that 39 minutes is not a meaningful sample size. It would not.
Too small of sample.
Yeah, it would not bring that lineup to a coach, especially Lionel Hollins. But you have that's just to me that's just common sense, right? I mean, that's.
Well, but I think the other thing is there are some things. Mike and I were talking earlier from a coaching thing, and one of the things that I know, like the analytics people, and again, I've never really worked with any. We did some on our own, actually. They'll talk about coaches being resistant to the data, and you'll see different coaches mentioned, and I don't think, in large part, we're any more resistant to analytics stuff than a lot of the analytics people are to the viewpoints we have. Like, a lot of you analytics people, no, really, I mean, no, think that the game is a video game, and so that players will always react as your models say they will react. And we were talking on a 2 for 1. And so 2 for 1 situations at the end of the quarter. I know, I've read the analytics on it. I know that's something that by the numbers we should do, and we didn't do it. And the reason is, now you can argue with this if you want, I just want to show that there's another side to this that you need to at least consider.
This is really, really important.
Just at least consider, and RC and Kevin know this, okay? So whether you agree with 2 for 1 or not, a guy races the ball up the floor at any time in the game and jacks up some horseshit shot. Look at the other 4 guys on the floor that he's playing with. Every one of them is going to be like, what the heck? They don't run back as hard. And now when you start the 4th quarter, after the guy just did that in the 3rd quarter, now the next guy who gets the ball says, I'm jacking up the next one. One of the things in coaching is you're trying to create a style of play and a culture that this is how we play the game. And every time you make an exception to that, Every time you make an exception and we'll say, okay, this is how we play the game, but not in this case. In this case, you're allowed to throw up whatever crap you want. Then you're breaking down your system a little bit. Now, we can argue back and forth how much, okay? And there may be some players very astute on your team that say, okay, well, it's a 2-for-1 situation. We can do that. But you're starting to give the guy a little bit more leeway in terms of his shot selection and everything else. And so we didn't do it. Now, I knew what the analytics were. I'm not rejecting the analytics. I'm not even saying I'm definitely right, but there's another side to consider.
Well, and I would echo that in that we played the Clippers the other night, and Chris Paul got the ball with 7 seconds or 8 seconds, and he did 2-for-1, or 29 or 31 seconds, and he did 2-for-1 3 straight times and got great stuff. So I think it's also interdependent on who's taking those shots and how much trust you have in that. If you got Tony Parker and Chris Paul, well, you know, maybe you let that go a little bit more.
I'm curious, are we at a point, talking about, that's a very nuanced argument Stan made, but in terms of coaches who disavow analytics, I'm not going to name names, but certainly coaches have publicly said this year that they've been outspoken against analytics. Are we at a point where a GM RC would, in their mind, that would be a stigma, that a coach would be as fervently anti-analytics, whatever analytics may mean?
I think that's the first thing, is defining what analytics mean. And I don't think analytics is limited to number crunching. And I think an approach of wanting to be thoughtful, wanting to analyze all the situations that Stan takes, and then determining whether the numbers fit what the system is. I think if somebody doesn't have that type of approach, it would cause me pause to want to bring that person into our organization, because I think the decisions that happen throughout the course of a season can't be done without an approach of heavy analysis. But I don't think it's necessarily limited to number crunching. And so for that reason, if somebody just says, I'm going to do this the way I do it just because, and it's not going to be interdependent on who we're playing and who plays for us and the circumstances, then I think you'd have to step back and say, is that the person that I want leading my team?
Right. And
well, look, and I think RC's exactly right. I mean, you want people at all levels of your organization who are people who are looking for a better way to do things. And I think analytics is a huge part of that. But there's other things that are a part of it. I mean, I thought Mark Cuban made the best point of this entire conference yesterday when he sat up here and said that you got to understand, most people, their goal isn't to try to win championships. Everybody's trying to save their job. And I think if you're somebody hiring a coach, the goal isn't for a guy to follow your analytics. That might be one of the things you do. The goal's to win games, okay? That's what we should be trying to do in an organization. There are coaches that are stuck on their system ahead of adjusting and winning games. And then there's people who are stuck on their way of doing things, like it's all got to fit my analytics more than they are winning games. And the mark of a coach is not understanding the analytics, okay? That may help you. As a coach, you've got to be able to go out and get a team to perform, okay? So I know how important it is as a coach, and probably there's several coaches that do, that we limit layup attempts, that we limit free throw attempts, that we limit three-point attempts. But some coaches can get their guys to actually do that, and others can sit in like you guys and play it like a video game, but can't actually get people to perform. The goal is to win, okay? The goal is to win, and we're not playing video games here.
I'll say this, though. There are discrete examples that if I had any authority at any point with the team, and obviously I don't and never will, that would give me pause. And one that comes to mind is the Celtics were playing the Nets in Brooklyn earlier this year. I think you were at that game. Okay. And the Nets were up by 4 with something like 29 seconds left. Nets up 4. And the Celtics took the ball out of bounds. And the Nets intentionally fouled Paul Pierce with a 4-point lead and 29 seconds left in the game. And all of us were like, what is Avery Johnson doing? Like, what's going on here? And you're giving the Celtics 2 points. And so we asked him after the game.
Well,
1.5 points. Okay. So we asked him we asked him after the game, what did you do? And or someone asked him, what were you thinking? And his response was something like, well, did you guys see that pull-up three that Paul Pierce hit a minute before that? We didn't want that to happen again. Now, there may be some mathematically sophisticated explanation justifying what Avery Johnson did. That is not it. And that justification is, no, I'm being serious. So if I were a GM and my coach said that, I would think it would put a bug in my ear of, I may have to talk to him because he does a lot of nice things as a coach, but that disturbs me. And again, there may be a mathematical justification for it that is just beyond my understanding, but that is a discrete example that would worry me a little bit.
If
Apparently it
I
did
was
stick
general
in-
manager of
in-
that team, I'd want to know that he's going to be doing that before the game, right? He should have gone through that process and said, look, here's what I think. When Paul Pierce hits a three and he's getting in rhythm, we want to foul him so he doesn't do it again. So I could at least have an intelligent conversation of, well, maybe that is or isn't the right way to do it.
And
I
those
wouldn't want to
are-
be surprised.
yeah.
As a general manager, the thing is, I just don't want to be surprised about those kind of things. And there's a big reason, because in 2 minutes after the game, the owner's going to ask me.
No question. But and I think that, that goes to what RC was talking about that I think was just a great point is it's beyond the numbers. You want people, coaches, assistant coaches, your front office people, everybody should be analytical type of people. And, we would sit and have discussions all the time in the off season, like RC's talking, like at what point on the clock, okay, are we looking quick three on a side out of bounds as opposed to quick two, because you can say, and the analysts will say it on TV all the time, well, they're down, 4 points. They don't need a three in this situation. They can go quick two. Well, that's great, except that if I'm playing against, Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, who are going to shoot 90% at the free throw line, and I get a quick two, and I foul them, I'm right back to being down four. Right. So we thought about things like that. If we're playing them late in the game, I'm more apt to try to get a three and cut it to one. So if I foul and they've got to get 2 free throws, those are things that we would not only talk about in the offseason in general, but with my assistant coaches as we were preparing for those situations in a game. It's different. Like a good friend of mine, Freddie Gonzalez, the manager of the Braves, in terms of baseball, and he knows, look, he wouldn't be classified as an analytics guy, but he knows all the numbers in terms of probability. You get the leadoff hitter on, probability of scoring 1 run if you bunt the guy to second or you don't. But he said a lot of that depends on who's pitching against me. I probably just play for 1 run in the first inning more against Roy Halladay than I would against somebody else. Or if I've got my ace on, there's a lot of things you got to take into mind. So there's no number out there that will solve all the problems. You've got to have what RC's talking about, an analytical type of organization where you're looking for better answers all the time.
But see, to me, that is analytics, right? If you're asking me, and we all may have a different definition of it, and you'll hate me now for calling you an analytics guy, I'm sure. Maybe you'll hate yourself. But I really, that's what we're talking about. We're thinking what Kevin's talking about. It's not just because the owner is going to ask you. Maybe you just live in fear of your owner, but I don't think so. We've talked a lot.
I used to, not so much anymore.
Okay. So you want to have a process in place for making reasoned decisions from the information that you have. That's all, right? And so I don't know if there was in New Jersey or not, but it was weird.
It was weird. It was definitely weird.
In East Panda Magazine's analytics issue, we talked about Ben Falk, who may or may not be in here, the 24-year-old whiz for the Blazers, who Kevin, you previously had worked with. And he, for the uninitiated, he holds a position of basketball analytics manager despite having played 0 organized basketball. And I'm curious to you guys, your opinion on this. Could you see a quantitative guy like that? Is there a ceiling on that kind of career trajectory? Can he rise to a position of general manager in today's NBA, or how far away are we when that first-hand experience doesn't really matter so much?
I think undoubtedly it's possible. But most analytic persons that sort of live in that world, what they're trying to do is either give you the best player, give you a position on the court to succeed, and give you all the numbers behind it. But being a general manager, in my opinion, it's like 10 or 20% is selection of players. I would say that once they get on your campus, once they're in your program, developing them, making sure that they're understanding what your culture is, all those things that go around building an organization, can that person understand it? For example, if there's issues within the locker room, can Wiz, and I hired Wiz, so we'll speak about him. Can he go try to talk to a superstar player about, you got to start playing harder, you got to do this, or you got to do that? And so I would worry about that. I think it's possible. This is the way I think it's possible. If he hires a great basketball person right next to him. And then there's still some maybe issues. I think at the end of the day, a GM has to understand what a bluing a pick and roll means, and can explain it to the owner or to the coach, and what are you guys doing here? And have just a basic, even more of a basic knowledge of the game that has taken me 20-some, 30-some years in this business. Because when you talk about, I don't know, help to helper or something that a coach brings up, Wiz may not be able to know exactly what that means. It's certainly not in the beginning, maybe over the course of time, over 10, 15 years, but I think it'd be difficult, but I think it's possible if he surrounds himself with really good basketball people around.
You really do call him Wiz?
Yeah. I think he called him himself.
Having coached Kevin, it took him a lot longer than that to understand.
That's not very funny.
But I think that there are people, you know, John Hollinger and Daryl came up with very non-traditional basketball backgrounds, and you know, they are rising up through NBA circles now. So I don't think that you can say that it's not possible.
I can't remember how much organized basketball you played or how much
high
organized
school.
basketball Sam Hinkie has played, but reportedly you guys were very close to, you know, possibly getting the Philadelphia GM job. So that would have been another one. I just think
It's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, my thing is everyone should get a chance to prove themselves, right? Like there are all these caricatures of what an analytics guy is and what a basketball guy is. And even you were talking about, you know, how the analytics guys play the video game instead of regular basketball. But like Sam Hinkie, John Hollinger, Ben Falk, all those guys, they can tell you what floppy is. They can tell you what icing a pick and roll is. They watch more basketball than anyone I know. And like they may not, those analytics guys may not enter an organization like that, but they deserve a chance to prove
Can they
themselves.
go in there and talk to the players? And will they be respected enough by their
Right, well,
players?
that's a culture of the players question. So are players ready for a GM who doesn't have firsthand basketball experience?
I mean, you got to talk to some in Houston, right? They seem to be doing okay right now.
I think,
Well,
and I
but
think,
all
I mean, well,
I
it's
think that's
zero. Like,
okay.
he does not have a.
but a big part yesterday was we've got people doing good numbers. We need better people communicating
Agreed.
those numbers. That's going to be the key to getting the
That's
relationship
exactly.
developed with the players, with the coach, with the owner, with whoever it is that gives that person the confidence to trust this person to step into the role, whatever the role is.
Well, and that's basically the coach's role. Anything in communicating with the players basically is coming down to the coach. And I think you have this mountain of information, and it's there for a reason, for, you know, to help guys understand what it is we want to do on the floor. And we can make that case, but we're going to have to distill the numbers down. You know, the football guys have a saying, cluttered minds equals slow feet. You know, so you can't go in, you're not going to, you can bring the printouts to me if you want, and I'll sift through them, but I'm not handing the players some stiff printout. You know, I mean, my brother has a joke, you know, they get all the stuff, and then he said, basically, I looked at it, and I had to go to Shane Battier and say, you know, Shane, all this stuff says LeBron's a pretty good player, and he's pretty good going to the basket. We need to try to keep him out of the paint. I mean, like, come on. I mean, it comes down to simple things, and the players don't always need all those numbers. We need them maybe. They certainly help us to go to the players and communicate what needs to be done for us to win the game. And we use numbers at times to make that case more solid to them, but you're not going to sit in that locker room and have a 45-minute session of analytics and numbers. I mean, what we need to figure out is what do we got to do to win this game? And we'll come to that by numbers, by film work, by everything else, and then we communicate that to the players.
But you control the most important asset as a coach. You control one of the most important assets in the league, which is playing time. And you should be able to go to Jordan Crawford or Nick Young and say, if the first off-the-dribble 19-footer you take with more than 15 seconds on the shot clock, you are coming out of the game. That is a bad shot.
Well, okay, look, I want to get to that point too, because there's a thing going around, and there was an article on ESPN.com today by somebody on the 10 things we still need to do in terms of analytics. Okay, Kevin Pelton, is that right?
He's here, right?
He's here.
Okay, but anyway, it was good. It was outstanding. On the things that, no, it really was. It was.
Where's Kevin?
It was
You can
outstanding.
come back in, Kevin.
Where's
No, it was
KP?
outstanding, and I read all of that. But one of the things he talked about is what is player development, and you hear this so much now because the thing that's in vogue in the league is, everybody's trying to lose. Okay, really, it's terrible. It might be great for the teams, might be a great idea. We were talking backstage, but it's terrible for the league. I mean, you've got 7, 8, 9 teams out there who their goal is to lose as many games as they possibly can. And I think that's a terrible product. But anyway, what they talk about is player development, and there's this idea that the way you develop players is you take these young guys on teams and you just put them out there and let them play a lot of minutes. Okay? I'm not sure that works. I think what works is you have players understanding, like Zach was just saying, these are the things you need to do if you want to play. And if you don't do them, you won't play. That's a big part of player development. So the Washington Wizards went through a time there where they took JaVale McGee and Andre Blatch, and they threw all those guys on the floor together, and they just let them play. Well, no, at some point, the idea is the players will continue to get better. I don't buy that. If I can play the way I'm playing and I don't have to change anything to get my playing time, why the hell am I going to change it? The only way they get better is these are our standards. This is the way we play basketball. And guys can sit, some of them, for 2 or 3 years until they can meet those standards, and then they will play better. I like young guys that go into good teams. I think they develop into better players a lot faster than they go into these bad teams and just get all this playing time. I mean, I don't know how that's developing players. I really don't.
To shift gears a little bit, player tracking technology and sport view cameras, RC, the Spurs are one of the teams that have access to these cameras. I'm curious, first off, how eye-opening has it been to have access to that data? And secondly, is it reasonable to imagine that defense, the holy grail of something to be quantified, could be quantified?
I'm not very smart about the number crunching, but to me, if we look back 10, 15 years from now, the number crunching will be a small part of what value analytics has brought to the NBA. And I think that the value from the player tracking and what it can be used for across the entire organization, from coaching and player development to player evaluation, to player valuations, and then fan engagement and marketing your team. That to me has a lot of value that we don't even know what the data says yet. I don't know that we have enough data to be drawing significant conclusions.
How far away are we, Kevin, do you think, defensively, from fully appreciating the value of a defensive player?
I think we're getting better. I think the sports view and the motion capture, I think that's given us a better understanding. And look, we're a pretty good defensive team because of our concepts and because we have players that fit into those concepts. Coach Vogel does an amazing job at that. And I think as we learn more about that, I think we'll get better. But are we at the holy grail yet? No, I don't think so. I think we're still a ways away.
What Stan said, though, too, is I think that the value from people who are analyzing this data is to get an understanding from the coaches. These are the things that are important to us. And now, how can we use the data to evaluate how well we're doing the things that are important to the success of this team?
And I think we're a long way off defensively. I mean, because even the things I like the presentation on interior defense and the Dwight effect, I thought was outstanding, okay? But I just have a different view of what defense is, and Indiana's great defensively. San Antonio was traditionally great, sort of, as RC said, slipped a little bit, and now has come back to being outstanding. And when I watch defensive teams, I mean, I don't think the problem is with the analytics defensively is this, is you're trying to isolate the stuff I've seen, you're trying to isolate individual players without the knowledge of what Kevin just brought up of what a coach's system is and stuff. So I had the analytics telling me that J.J. Redick was, one of the worst two-guard defenders in the league because people shot whatever percentage it was against them. I don't doubt that at all. He's small. He's not real athletic. I knew before I saw any numbers that people could shoot the ball over the top of him anytime they want. But I know this. You can have a very good, an outstanding defensive team with J.J. Redick as one of the players because he's not going to miss rotations that lead to uncontested layups and dunks. If he's supposed to chuck the roll man going to the basket, he will chuck the roll man every single time. If we're supposed to send Ray Allen baseline off a screen, he'll send him baseline every single time. So our team can come together defensively. I don't know, unless you know exactly what we want defensively, you cannot, any of you out there, possibly evaluate what's going on in terms of defensive players. You cannot. That has to be done internally in your organization. We've done a lot with grading defensive players, but it's specific to our system. The other thing I would say, and I know I'm talking a lot, and I apologize to the rest of the panelists, but...
They all want to hear you more than us.
But...
Is this the first time you've talked a lot?
Yeah. Well, but also you got to understand, I get no opportunities now. I'm the only one up here without a job, okay? So, but I would take issue again, and we could have, not issue, because we could have a great discussion. Daryl Morey, when he was up here yesterday, made the comment, players or coaches get upset like when a guy misses a rotation defensively, especially if he does it consistently. And you have to point out to the coach, yeah, but this guy gets steals, which is plus whatever, and then he hits a three, so in terms of our analytics, he's helping you. Fine, but now again, you're breaking down your culture defensively. If it's okay for that guy to miss his rotations consistently defensively, because he does these other things, well, now the rest of the people don't have to defend either, and pretty soon you've got no defensive culture at all. And I would say this, I have a pretty good idea without the analytics. I think, because I've studied the defensive end of the floor a lot. What matters, the size matters defensively. One of the great reasons Indiana's the #1 team in the league, and Memphis and Chicago were both up there. Those are the only three teams that refuse to downsize, okay, when other people downsize. They refuse. And so it may hurt them a little bit on the offensive end of the floor, but defensively they're great because size is important. And your system and your coaching is important defensively a lot more than offensively. It just is. And some people actually have some metrics to show some of those things because system is important. And so you can go out and take the guys that you analytics guys think are good defenders, and you throw them in with a coach that never works on defense in practice and stuff. I don't care who you've got. Those guys aren't guarding.
This stuff happens a lot, though, I think, with people who do a lot of this analysis. The same way it happens with fans. Someone will get past your perimeter defense into the lane. Guy will have to come in from the weak side to help. They throw the pass out, and he's got to close out. You go on some... I don't know, there's Synergy, which you guys might know, has all this video tracked. That's a closeout by that guy, and if he gets there late, and someone hits a three on him, it's counted against him. But really, he had to keep helping in because some guy on the other side of the court on the perimeter was just letting guy get to the hoop every time. And the guy I sit way up in the balcony in the garden, and the people who sit next to me will be like, God damn it, he's not closing out again. or you're late, or whatever it is that they say. They say worse things. And, you know, I'm upset at some guy on the other side of the court, but only because I've watched practice for the last 3 weeks, and we've been working on this, and the guy still doesn't get any better at it. That's the thing that you're talking about. If you don't understand the defensive system, you can't understand. If you're just looking at one guy's stats on who he's closest to or something like that, it's really difficult.
Simplistically, basketball is so complex. And to measure the most complex thing out there, when you have 5 players that are somewhat interconnected and so many things, I mean, the more I'm around it, the more I realize I don't know it. And because it's so complex, so you try to make some good decisions, and coaches make the best decisions, but no matter what you do on a basketball court, there's counters, right? So we're a pretty good defensive team in the paint, but people beat us in other things that we're weak at. So, and then the adjustments that happen, and what I like is when you see a great basketball game, when the coaches are making the chess moves, and that's when a game is an unbelievable thing, and it's hard for analytics to get what those moves are specifically within that game. And that's
the counter to all of this, of course, is that there are some modern scientific techniques for evaluating these things, right?
But yeah, like I'm unhealthily obsessed with NBA defense. I don't think we know all that much about it, and I want to know much more about it. And I agree that you have to understand how a team is supposed to play. But will you tell me, next time you get a head coaching job, will you grant me
That's a big if,
20 minutes to go through your system? Because
yeah.
I think if I watch 20 of your games, by the end of the year, if I watch them carefully, I should be able to understand with 90% certainty what J.J. Redick is supposed to do in every situation J.J. Redick faces.
And I agree. And there's also, and this is where I'm saying there's got to be a trade-off. You have to understand the trade-off. So you may very well be playing a guy who, and we've all had these guys. I never played them very much, but, you know, the guys that constantly screw up plays, you know, and constantly miss rotations and things. And
Constantly.
no, constantly. I mean, constantly. Now, what I mean by constant may not be what Mike means, but, you know, and then I've had people come to me and try to tell me, all right, I understand this guy's frustrating, but he's actually helping you, and they give me the analytics. And no, on that case, I don't want to hear it, because it goes back to what Kevin was talking about, a culture you're trying to build, and no one's done that better than San Antonio in building a culture. And you've got to control the things that are controllable. That's one thing. And you're a player. I might not be able to stop LeBron James, but if I'm supposed to be in this spot on a rotation, I can be there. And when I'm not there, I'm breaking down trust on all of my teammates, and our system will crumble. So yes, those guys, in my opinion, have got to be eliminated. I don't care what your analytics show. Our team has to perform, okay? And those guys have to be eliminated from playing time until they get it, so that our team can do the things that they need to do.
If you're going to do that, though, you better be confident in the system, right? So if you're asking them to do something ridiculous, they may not be able to do it.
Well, what's ridiculous?
No,
I mean,
know.
come to help on somebody driving.
That's not ridiculous.
You know, Dwight Howard's playing Tony Parker on the pick and roll. Tim Duncan rolls. You're the low guy. Step over and take him.
Sure.
And, you know, you don't do it either because you're too soft to do it, or you don't have the knowledge or whatever. But I'll tell you what, see, this is where things break down. So you may say, yeah, but that guy hits a lot of threes, or he got a steal, or, well, that's great. But see, what you don't understand, and that's why I say it's not a video game. When that guy doesn't take the roll, man, then the next time, Dwight Howard doesn't want to leave Tim Duncan to play Tony Parker on it all starts to break down. There's human elements to this.
And I think you want to grade defense, be able to grade the breakdowns in your system. Find out what
Absolutely.
Find out what the things that are important,
Absolutely.
not the players. Find out these are the things that are important to our defensive system. And then let's grade how efficient we are. And it gives coaches actionable data, or if it can give coaches actionable data to then go to the team or to the players and say, here's the reasons why you're not playing. Or here's the reasons why our defense is breaking down, because you're not rotating to the right spot, or we only getting 2 rotations and not a third, or whatever that might be.
Right. One more question for RC, and then we're going to get some questions from the audience. I'm curious about, I mean, we're talking about fit, right? Fitting into a system, having the type of player that you like. In terms of analytics and psychological profiling, what is realistic to imagine in terms of being able to predict that stuff before you bring a player in to make sure that he's the guy who's going to do what you want him to do?
You know, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer that question. I would say I think most psychological profiles are designed to pick out the outliers on the low end and not to predict extremely high behavior patterns. The other thing I think is that if you spend time doing your work prior to the intel work, talking to people that are coaching him, playing with him, getting to know the person, the things you learn from there, to me, are going to be as important or more important than any psychiatric metric that we've come up with to date. I don't know if everybody feels differently about this.
Right. Well, some audience questions. The first one is from D. Maury, or we'll call him Daryl M. What do you know that your owner would not want you to share?
What do we think about Daryl?
Everything.
What are NBA teams doing with analytics to manage players' injury prevention and the sort of long 82-game season that they play?
I think we're trying to capture more data than we've ever captured, and you know, probably the two fastest growing areas right now are medicine and technology. And the better you bring those two together, I think the better injury prevention, return to play criteria you're going to have. But again, I think that there's probably 30 different platforms that those are being developed through.
Rest and recovery. I mean, that's where a lot of time is spent. I think San Antonio does a great job, even though they've been fined a few times for it.
Cost us a little money.
I mean, they look, the season is so long, sometimes you got to look at it as a big picture. And the way Pop looks at it and says, you know, maybe this one game we're going to set the guys out. And it's also great for the team, the rest of the guys, because if you've got guys busting their butt every single day and maybe deserve some minutes, hey, throw them a little bone, see how they play, see how they react to it, because that could help you down the line, not only resting the guys, but also give those guys a little confidence.
That's what happened with you guys, RC, last year. That game in Dallas where the backups played the whole fourth quarter, played overtime. Danny Green hit some crazy shots. And the Stars weren't resting that game. They played and they just sat out because the bench was rolling. That seemed to catalyze your team. Like, you were 11-7 at some point, and then you caught fire after that. And like, as an analytics-oriented person, I tend to move away from momentum and emotion and all that stuff. But that seemed like a real thing. Those bench guys got in, and it like changed the way your season went. I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up.
You got to also understand now, and Pop does, as like Kevin's, I mean, does a tremendous job with managing guys, especially older guys and everything else. But you also have to understand, in fairness to a lot of other coaches, they're not all in that situation where you know you're going to be in the playoffs. You know you're going to have a home court, and so 1 or 2 games don't matter. If you're Milwaukee right now and you're Jim Boylan, you better be trying to win every game. Even you guys, you're trying to win every. So, you know, no, but I think what
I wish we were doing more injury analytics.
But what I'm saying is, a lot of times people I think will unfairly judge. They'll look at a guy like Pop, and there's no question he's doing a great job. But he's also, you got to judge by the situation. So if Kevin McHale decides all of a sudden on a back-to-back and he's up 2 games in the playoff race with the Lakers that he's going to sit everybody out to rest them, that could be a stupid decision. It's the same decision, but in one case it's a great decision, and in another case it's a stupid decision, because coaches, general managers, everybody's in different situations. And if you can't adjust any of your analysis to specific situations, then it doesn't work.
Another question, is Rondo's injury a good test for analytics that say the team performs well or better without him on the floor?
I like these questions.
I think I might actually defer to Stan's brother from last year who actually answered this question on last year's panel, even though Rajan was not yet heard at that time. And I went on some very long tangent about how some hypothetical player could make your team better in some ways and worse in other ways, and you have to look at the totality of everything. And Jeff said, or you could just tell the first guy he's really, really stupid and that the Celtics are way better when Rondo's playing. So, you know, I think what happens when you have a guy who gets hurt is other guys have to do different things than they were doing before. And so a couple things can happen, right? Some guys can actually do different things that they're better at, but also what can happen is you can have a really easy home schedule for the next few weeks. All sorts of different things can happen. I don't think there's any question that we would be better if we had Rajan playing. At the same time,
we would have really expected you to say something different.
Oh, of course.
Sitting up here.
But the point is just you do. I mean, I think there's a hint in that question that are we learning some things from this? And the answer is absolutely, we're learning some things from this, right? We wouldn't have gotten to see Leandro play a bunch that he did get to play. Unfortunately, he then went and got hurt too.
We have the same thing.
You know,
Danny Granger goes out.
Yeah.
Guys have to step up. You get to evaluate how they can handle that role of being, you know, the offensive guy. And Paul George has stepped up in a unique way. And so, yeah, we've learned about Paul George and his growth. That's every team goes through that. And you just, you know, try to make the best decisions from what you learn from that situation.
Natural experiments, and natural experiments, when something happens, you sort of don't have control of it, and you can keep track of things, right? So, are really useful in every field. This is one of them. So.
But I think that's where our profession fails in a situation like this, because we are.
What gets the most hits? Celtics are worse without Rondo.
But
Worse with Rondo,
instant
right?
takes, 5 games, Celtics are better without Rondo. And it's like the least sexy thing you can write in media is, I don't know, we have to have more data, we have to be patient. You guys were bad with Rondo offensively. I'll bet you end the season just about as bad without him as you were with him. And like that's a total non-conclusion. I mean, that's but
I'm not happy either way now, right?
But I'm saying, like, there's already been takes in the media that the Celtics are better off without Rondo, and then like 5 games later, it's like, oh, now they miss Rondo. It's like we have to just be patient about these things. They're complicated questions.
Yeah, there is a possibility that they're going to play better.
Absolutely.
Over a longer period of time. Without him, it's possible that as good as a guy is individually, that it works better the other way. And a lot of times we find those things out because of situations like this. Doesn't mean the guy can't help you. And I'm not saying it's definitely true, or not. I have my opinions, but that's not really important. But it's also possible that what that guy needs to do when he comes back is adjust what he's been doing because of the way it affects other people. And so you can't, and obviously when Mike sits up here, he's not going to throw his guy under the bus, okay? But it is possible. And we at least have to engage the possibility that, yes, they are a better basketball team without him. That's at least possible, and you can't just dismiss that. You got to look at it.
We've certainly found things we're good at doing that we weren't doing before. Now, whether that's because of him or because of other things that we've changed, because of the other personnel or whatever. I mean, things have changed with the Celtics. It's very clear.
And
right?
as analytical as we all are, too, we get lucky sometimes.
No
okay?
question.
Now, listen. We ended up going to the NBA Finals one year, and we did it with Rashard Lewis playing the 4 and Hedo Turkoglu playing the 3. And, so I had 2 3-men, and boy, what a great decision and everything else. I'll tell you what happened. I got the job. Tony Battie was going to be our starting 4, and he tore up his shoulder. And so we didn't have him my first year there. And so I wasn't going to start those 2 guys together, Turkoglu and Rashard Lewis. But I didn't have much choice after that. Right. So then we figured it out, and we were good, and we stayed that way. So I became a genius because Tony Battie got hurt guarding Dwight Howard in September in a pickup game, And so there was a topic here, right, on randomness and everything else. Sometimes, let's just admit it, we got lucky.
I said this a couple years
Spurs
ago.
They've
That
been lucky for a long time, though.
Now, the Spurs aren't lucky. They know what they're doing.
you can do everything right and not win, but you can't do everything wrong and win. Right?
How realistic is it for coaches to use data to make in-game decisions given everything else that goes on in the tornado of a basketball game?
Oh, well, I think Kevin really hit it on the head with that, and RC also in terms of off-season discussions of their defense or talking before the game about a situation. Look, you don't have time. Like, what am I going to do? I've got a 20-second timeout. I'm going to pull out my spreadsheet. And no, that's not going to happen. But hopefully you're utilizing all the information at your disposal to have, with your staff, talk through and analyze those situations ahead of time. And then even on an in-game, or per-game basis, because you're playing different teams. So late in the game, holding for one shot, Miami, are we going to run and double LeBron James or not? I mean, that's something that we would have talked about before the game. So when it comes up, you can make the decision like that, but you didn't really make it like that. It was something you had already talked through, and hopefully you've covered most everything that comes up. I mean, maybe occasionally you get hit with something you hadn't thought about, and you end up having to make the decision on the fly, and generally those decisions won't be as good as the ones you make when you think them out.
I would also say with the data that we currently have, maybe somebody invents something that brings a different platform at some point.
What role should the league have itself in terms of data capture and distribution to teams? Mark Cuban obviously is outspoken.
This is a setup question
On this
from
point.
someone. I mean, I'd like to have the tracking data in all 30 arenas. I don't know who's out there deciding that, but I know someone's in the room who has something to do with deciding that. So,
It's coming. I don't think there's any doubt that all 30 teams at some point in time will have all the data capture, whether it gets disseminated or, certain teams buy into it and get that information. But it's coming.
there will always be things, though, that each team wants to keep track of themselves just because of the stuff that they're doing. And, when you have a set of employees who are supposed to accomplish some task, you're going to want to keep track of those specific tasks and how well they're doing them. So different teams have different goals. They're running different stuff. So you're going to keep track of that stuff differently. But the rules of the game are the same for everyone. And so most stuff, all the teams should, want to have all the data that they can get.
Right. One more quick question, then we'll be done. In terms of, so over the All-Star weekend, Chris Paul had this comment that was kind of a dog whistle for anybody who's a basketball nerd, and he said, I'm on Synergy, this thing called Synergy all the time. How much of an effort is being made to teach players or familiarize them with analytics directly, or are you not there yet, or is it just not that essential?
Well, Synergy is not really analytics. Synergy is just watching video of your opponent. That's what he's doing. He's going in there and saying, listen, I'm guarding George Hill. I want to see all his tendencies over, the last 20 games and where is he successful, where he isn't. So it's more on video in terms of George Hill shooting 42%. He's going in there and watching exactly what he does on pick and roll offense, pick and roll defense, so he has all his counters. And I think players are adopting that. More and more players are watching video, specifically Synergy, to pick up those tendencies.
I think that what's available to our players continues to get better. And if you've got 450 players, you're going to have 450 different needs or wants from them.
That's one thing we've really found is the not just the appetite, but also the capacity for digesting all of that information varies really widely by player. So some guys want hours of video before each game, and they want it on this device over here. And another guy wants a DVD of 5 minutes of some set of clips of a guy he might be guarding. Now you might say, all right, we need to work on helping one of those players adjust the things that they want to look at. But people are different, right? So you're going to have different needs.
Look, teams fly a lot of air miles. You can either spend that time watching film or playing cards against Tony Allen. I know what I would want to do and what I would want my players to do, right?
That's right.
Well, yeah, but let's also. No, I agree, and that's what look. I mean, I'm obsessive. Yeah, I'd love my players to be sitting there, spending their flight watching film, but there is a value also to getting away from it. I mean, so let's not downplay that. I mean, we push our players pretty hard in things, and just like there's a need for physical rest, there's a need for mental rest. It was always interesting to me, like we would never go more than 4 days in a row, ever. And we wanted to practice hard when we practiced. We were a team that believed in practicing hard, but we would never go more than 4 days in a row. And it was interesting to me is on all those off days, 3/4 of our guys would come in and work out in things. What they enjoyed was getting away from me for a day. No, but getting away
We
from...
can understand that.
No, yeah.
To be on the panel.
And you understand that too. I mean, you and RC both played, at high levels. But what they enjoyed was...
RC did not. I can promise you that.
But getting away from them... Kevin,
I've seen him play. It's not pretty. I had to get him back for getting me
But you
earlier.
understand the value of getting away from the mental part. Like, yeah, I'll come in and work on my shooting, but God, don't give me a scouting report today.
Right.
I want to get away from it for a day. As much as there's a value in physical rest, there's a value in mental
question.
rest also. So the card game on the plane has some other problems.
There could be a value to getting away
but-
from Tony Allen.
Yeah, but,
Well, speaking
Tony.
of
He's my
getting
guy.
away from things, this panel is over. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to our panel. Terrific.
the longest you've ever been without them.